Welcome to our episode of Middle East Briefing, where we skim through the waves of current events to bring you a snapshot of what's making headlines. Grab your cup of coffee, and let's dive in. Starting off on the sports field, the Asian Football Confederation, AFC, has just rolled out the red carpet for the 2026 World Cup qualifiers. It's a long road ahead for the teams, with the journey kicking off in October 2023 and wrapping up with the Interconfederation playoffs in November 2025. Only 8 teams will punch their direct tickets to the World Cup, with a ninth having a shot through the playoffs. It's going to be an intense and thrilling ride for football fans across Asia. Switching gears to a more pressing issue, the Gaza Strip is teetering on the brink of a famine, with a dire warning issued by food security experts. The situation is described as imminent, and if that wasn't troubling enough, recent military actions have further compounded the crisis. Israeli forces have conducted raids, including one on Gaza City's Al-Shifa hospital, leading to casualties and raising concerns over the collapsing healthcare system. Amidst these tensions, the shadow of hunger looms large over the northern part of Gaza, with over half of its population facing catastrophic levels of hunger. On the geopolitical chessboard, an intriguing alliance is forming between China, Russia, and Iran. These nations are banding together, aiming to counterbalance American sanctions and advocate for a world not solely under U.S. influence. They're weaving tighter economic ties, seeking alternative payment systems, and essentially trying to create a new power bloc. Yet, it's not all smooth sailing. Challenges such as competition for China's oil market and the West's sanctions could rock the boat. Meanwhile, back in the U.S., Senator Bernie Sanders is calling for a revolution in American foreign policy, emphasizing human rights and global solidarity over military might and corporate interests. That's a wrap on today's briefing. From the football fields of Asia to the tense streets of Gaza and the high-stakes geopolitical maneuvers, it's a world bustling with activity and challenges. Please stay tuned for more detailed coverage on these stories. Asian, AFC, 2026 World Cup qualifying schedule, results, table. Yahoo! The Asian Football Confederation, AFC, has released the qualification format for the 2026 World Cup in Asia. The qualification process will begin in October 2023 and end with the Interconfederation playoffs in November 2025. Only 8 teams will directly qualify for the World Cup, while a 9th team will have a chance to make it through the Interconfederation playoffs. The qualification process will consist of multiple group stages and will involve 20 teams in the first round, 36 teams in the second round, 18 teams in the third round, 6 teams in the fourth round, and 2 teams in the fifth round. Food experts predict imminent famine in northern Gaza. New York Times. The Gaza Strip is on the verge of famine, with a major acceleration of deaths and malnutrition imminent, according to a report from the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification Global Initiative. The report warns that the food shortage in the war-ravaged enclave has become so severe that famine is imminent. The group, which was set up by UN agencies and international relief groups, has only issued similar warnings in Somalia in 2011 and South Sudan in 2017. The report comes as Israeli forces raided Al-Shifa hospital in northern Gaza, sparking an hours-long battle in which casualties were reported. Israeli forces raid Gaza City Hospital, U.S. confirms death of top Hamas leader. Washington Post. The IDF has confirmed that it has killed a Hamas official inside Gaza City's Al-Shifa medical complex. Marwan Issa, the deputy commander of the Hamas's military wing, was killed in an Israeli strike on October 7. In a separate operation, the IDF killed Fake Mabhou, a senior Hamas official, in an attack on Al-Shifa. The IDF claims that the hospital is used by Hamas as a cover for military activities. The attacks on hospitals have drawn criticism from humanitarian groups, who claim that the healthcare system in Gaza is on the verge of collapse. Palestinian officials have disputed Israel's claims regarding the military significance of the operation at Al-Shifa. Meanwhile, a UN report has suggested that famine may have already reached the northern part of Gaza. The report states that over half of the 2.2 million people in Gaza are facing catastrophic levels of hunger. The report also suggested that the UN was failing to distribute aid and that Hamas militants were diverting aid from those in need. Israel denies that it has limited the flow of aid into Gaza. How China, Russia and Iran are forging closer ties. Economist. The alliance between Russia, Iran, and China is growing stronger as the 3 countries seek to counter American sanctions and promote a multipolar world not dominated by the U.S. They are increasing economic ties, including trade agreements, tariff-free blocs, and alternative payment systems, in an effort to bypass Western-controlled locations. China has become a major customer of both Russian and Iranian oil, providing a lifeline for these countries in the face of Western embargoes. However, the alliance faces challenges, including limited trade between Iran and Russia, lack of common banking channels, and the need for investment. The economies of Iran and Russia are too similar to be natural trading partners, and they are competing to win a larger share of China's oil imports. China, on the other hand, has become a competitor to Iran in manufacturing, flooding Iran's target markets with cheaper, better versions of its goods. The West's existing sanctions and the threat of more will continue to cause trouble for the alliance, with potential consequences for China's business in the West. However, the alliance is still in its early stages and remains a vehicle that serves China's interests. It is uncertain how it will develop in the future, but if China is forced out of Western markets, it may put more resources into forming an alternative bloc and building broader alliances. A revolution in American foreign policy. Foreign affairs. The United States' foreign policy has been consistently flawed and damaging, from its involvement in wars and coups to its trade agreements and support for authoritarian regimes, writes Senator Bernie Sanders. He argues that it is time for a fundamental reorientation of American foreign policy, one that prioritizes human rights, multilateralism, and global solidarity. This new vision should address issues such as climate change, global pandemics, wealth inequality, and tax evasion, and it should focus on building a world order based on international law and cooperation. Sanders criticizes the bipartisan consensus that has dominated U.S. foreign policy for decades, pointing out that it has led to disastrous wars, the erosion of American credibility, and the prioritization of corporate interests over the needs of the people. He calls for an end to endless wars and defense contracts, fair trade agreements that benefit workers and the poor, and cuts to excessive military spending. He also advocates for stronger support for international institutions, such as the United Nations and the World Health Organization, and for greater accountability for war profiteering and tax evasion. By shifting its foreign policy focus to issues such as human rights, economic development, and global cooperation, the United States can not only address the world's most pressing challenges but also restore its own credibility and strengthen its democratic institutions. Sanders argues that this shift in foreign policy would benefit the American people and the international community as a whole, leading to greater justice, prosperity, and stability. Ultimately, he asserts that the United States' greatest strength lies in its values of freedom and democracy, and it must prioritize these values in its foreign policy decisions. Trump says Jewish Democrats hate their religion. Washington Post. Former President Donald Trump has claimed that the Democratic Party hates Israel, and that Jewish Americans who vote for Democrats hate their religion. Trump made the comments in response to Senate Majority Leader Charles E. Schumer's call for a new election in Israel, which many Republicans took as an attack on Israel. Trump has previously accused the Democratic Party of being anti-Israel and anti-Jewish. Trump has repeatedly voiced his frustration over his unpopularity among Jewish voters, a bloc that overwhelmingly supported President Biden in the 2020 election. Israeli delegation to visit Washington to discuss planned offensive on Rafah. Yahoo! Israel will send a team of officials to Washington to discuss its planned offensive on Rafah, the White House has said, as the Biden administration insists that an attack would be a mistake and seeks to persuade Israel to allow in more aid in the face of an imminent famine in Gaza. The U.S. National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, announced the Israeli visit after a phone call on Monday between Joe Biden and the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, focusing on the planned Rafah assault that Netanyahu has vowed to launch. Biden warns Netanyahu against mistake of invading Rafah, White House. Al-Jazeera. The U.S. has warned Israel against invading the city of Rafah in the Gaza Strip, saying that such a ground operation would worsen the humanitarian crisis in the enclave. Israeli leaders have repeatedly expressed their intention to invade Rafah, which is a key hub for humanitarian aid coming through the Egyptian border. However, UN experts have warned of a looming famine in the territory, and Western countries, including Israel's allies in Europe, have cautioned against an assault on Rafah. The U.S. has now joined those calls, stating that Palestinians in Rafah have nowhere else to go. Coach plots World Cup upset as Hong Kong FA stays silent over contract talks. South China Morning Post. Jorn Anderson, head coach of the Hong Kong national football team, has not been offered a new contract and is considering his future. Anderson's current contract expires in June next year, and he has not had any communication from the Hong Kong FA regarding a new deal. Since taking charge, Anderson has led Hong Kong to the Asian Cup finals in Qatar and the last 4 of the Asian Games in Hangzhou. Despite these achievements, the FA has not moved to secure the 61-year-old on a longer term. Anderson said the governing body had not spoken to him about its plans. Who was Marwan Issa, the Hamas commander killed by Israel? New York Times. Marwan Issa, the deputy commander of Hamas's military wing in Gaza, has been confirmed dead after an Israeli airstrike more than a week ago. Issa was one of the highest-ranking officials in Hamas and was presumed to be a mastermind of the October 7 assault on southern Israel. Although Israeli officials have characterized the strike as a breakthrough in their campaign to wipe out the Hamas leadership in Gaza, experts caution that his death will not have a devastating effect on Hamas's leadership structure. Israel has killed Hamas's political and military leaders in the past, only to see them quickly replaced. Issa was described as an important strategist and played a key role as a liaison between Hamas's military and political leaders. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.